Growing up, I never imagined my brother Alex, 36, would become my worst enemy. We were brothers in every sense, close enough to share childhood pranks, but distant enough to fight over the silliest of things. Our parents, staunch believers in family unity, made sure we understood that family came first. It's ironic, really, how I was the only one who carried that belief into adulthood. 6 years ago, when I was 26, I met Emily. She was stunning, sharp, and had a presence that commanded attention. At 32 now, she was then part of the same friend circle I hung out with, and the moment we met, I was completely hooked. To me, she was perfect, tall, eloquent, with an easy grace that hid her cunning. I was so in love that I overlooked all her toxic traits, which would later unravel my world. Emily was a drama queen, addicted to chaos in a way that felt almost theatrical. I, being non-confrontational, ignored the signs. I excused the relentless arguments over trivial things and convinced myself that love was supposed to be hard. But 6 months into our whirlwind romance, I learned the painful truth. She was cheating on me with a coworker. I discovered this by accident, and it felt as though the ground had been ripped from under me. Confronting her was brutal. She denied it, gaslighted me until I doubted my sanity, and only confessed after breaking down. She begged for a second chance, swore she'd never stray again, and in a moment of weakness, I agreed. Deep down, I knew cheaters don't change. Experience had taught me this. Still, I wanted to believe she was the exception, the one worth risking it all for. For a few weeks, things were okay. We found our rhythm, and the cracks seemed to mend. But soon, her behavior turned erratic. Late-night outings she couldn't explain, guarded glances at her phone. I wanted to trust her, so I ignored it. But the doubt festered until I felt like I was losing my mind. I confronted her again, hoping I was wrong. But instead of reassurance, she lashed out. "Why don't you just admit you'll never trust me?" She snapped, turning the blame on me. It was textbook gaslighting, and it worked. I apologized stupidly for doubting her, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave, and my instincts screamed that something was wrong. Then came the day I crossed a line. I checked her phone. If there was ever a clear signal that a relationship was beyond saving, it was that moment. The trust was gone, replaced by desperation. But when I finally pieced together the puzzle, my world stopped. It wasn't just another man. It was Alex, my brother, the person who knew me better than anyone. The messages were damning, casual confessions wrapped in late-night banter, confessions of moments stolen when they thought no one was looking. My heart plummeted, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. I felt the rage and disbelief mix into a searing cocktail. The room spun, and I had to step outside to stop myself from smashing more than just her phone. When Emily saw me with her phone in my hand, the color drained from her face. She yelled at me for invading her privacy, but I didn't respond. I just held up the screen showing Alex's name, let it speak for itself, and left. The night air was cold, but it did nothing to numb the storm inside me. My phone buzzed relentlessly, Emily calling, then Alex. I ignored them all. I went home eventually and sent Emily a text telling her to pack her things and leave. She did without protest, which was a small mercy in the wreckage she left behind. Alex never reached out again, and I didn't expect him to. What could he say? He'd already said it all in those texts. A week later, I told my parents. I needed them to understand why Alex was dead to me. They listened, horrified but supportive, taking my side. For months, they stood by me, confronting Alex and pushing him to face what he had done. He didn't apologize. Instead, he justified it. "We were in love," he had the audacity to claim. My parents were livid, but after a while their fury cooled and they started to ask for peace between us. But there was no peace to be had. Alex was no longer my brother. He was a ghost. And that ghost haunted me every time I looked at our family photos or thought back to simpler times. Therapy helped, slowly. It taught me to accept the past and the harsh lessons it brought. And amidst that storm, I found grace in the form of Mia. Mia was like a light at the end of a dark tunnel. When we met, I was still picking up the pieces of my shattered trust, unsure if I could ever let someone in again. But Mia, 27 at the time, was different. She was genuine, thoughtful, and so effortlessly kind. Our relationship was the opposite of what I had with Emily. It was peaceful, nurturing, and full of trust. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was real. and it was exactly what I needed. 2 years passed and our relationship grew stronger. I didn't tell anyone in my family about Mia for the first year. I kept it to myself, letting this new chapter be something sacred, away from prying eyes and judgment. Mia knew all about my past with Alex and Emily. She knew why my brother and I were estranged and how hard it was for me to move past it. It wasn't easy to talk about, but she listened, never pushing, always patient. When I finally introduced Mia to my parents, their joy was palpable. They were relieved, genuinely happy that I was in a good place again. But their happiness was layered with an ulterior motive I hadn't expected. After congratulating us on our engagement, my mother, always the peacemaker, said something that hit me like a punch to the gut. Now that you're moving forward with Mia, we can be a family again, she said, her eyes glistening with hope. I could feel Mia's supportive hand squeeze mine under the table, sensing the tension building inside me. What do you mean by that, Mom? I asked, already knowing where this conversation was going but hoping I was wrong. She sighed as if preparing for battle. Alex, it's time to put it behind you. It's been years, and he's changed. He's no longer with Emily. You both need to reconcile. Family sticks together. The words stung, each one twisting the knife deeper. I kept my voice steady, trying to keep the peace for Mia's sake. Mom, I need you to understand. This isn't just about Emily. It's about the betrayal, the trust that Alex broke. I can't just pretend that never happened. Her face hardened, and I saw the cracks in her patience start to form. He's your brother, Mark. Blood is thicker than water. We need to be a family, especially now that you're starting a new chapter. Don't you think it's time to forgive? Mia's thumb traced calming circles on the back of my hand, a silent message. You don't have to answer to anyone but yourself. Mom, this isn't about forgiveness or family. This is about what I can live with, and I can't live with pretending everything is okay when it's not. Alex chose to betray me. I didn't choose this, I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. The silence that followed was deafening. My dad, who'd stayed quiet throughout, finally spoke up. Enough, Linda, let it go. Mark's made his decision. Mom's face turned stony, her lips pressed tight. Dinner that night was awkward, punctuated by forced smiles and hollow small talk. Mia stayed quiet but supportive, her presence grounding me through every second of that torturous evening. For weeks, my mom didn't bring up Alex again. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes every time she glanced at me said it all. She couldn't understand why I was choosing to hold on to what she saw as old wounds. But I wasn't holding on. I was protecting myself, building a life free from people who hurt me without remorse. When wedding plans began, my mom seemed to back down. She helped with preparations and even apologized for pushing me, claiming she now understood that some things couldn't be fixed. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that she'd let it go. Mia and I were deep in the chaos of seating charts and cake tastings, and life was full of that pre-wedding excitement mixed with stress. My dad stayed out of most of the planning, while Mom and Mia's mom bonded over flower arrangements and caterer selections. It felt normal, peaceful, almost like we'd found a truce. But beneath the surface, I should have known better. On the day of the wedding, everything was perfect, or at least it was until Rick, my best man and friend since high school, burst into the room looking panicked. Mark, we have a problem, he said, pulling me away from a group of friends who were cracking jokes and calming my nerves. What's going on? I asked, feeling the first chill of dread crawl up my spine. It's your parents. They brought Alex. He's here, with his wife Dot. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I felt Mia's gaze from across the room as she noticed my sudden shift. Are you serious? I whispered, the rage simmering just below the surface. Rick nodded, eyes full of worry. I tried to get them to leave, told them this would blow up, but your mom, she said Alex is your real brother and that you'd understand. The absurdity of her words stung. My parents hadn't just crossed a line, they'd obliterated it. This was my wedding day, the one day I thought they'd respect my boundaries. I wanted to charge out there, confront them all and make a scene. But Rick, ever the strategist, pulled me aside and whispered, I have an idea, but you need to think this through. You could turn this around and make them see what they've done without causing a brawl. My mind raced. Part of me wanted nothing more than to throw Alex and my parents out. Consequences be damned. But I could already see Mia watching me, worry etched in her features. This was her day too. I owed it to her to keep my rage in check. Tell me the plan, I said, my voice cold and controlled. Rick's eyes gleamed with a hint of mischief as he outlined what we could do. It was bold, risky, and dripping with irony, but it was the only way to make them understand the depth of their betrayal. Standing in the small alcove with Rick, the weight of what I was about to do bore down on me. This was my wedding day, a day meant to be shared with joy and love, not the bitter aftertaste of old betrayals. But this was also the moment my family needed to realize that their actions had consequences. I looked over at Mia, her dark hair pinned up elegantly, eyes filled with concern. She caught my gaze and tilted her head, silently asking if I was okay. I took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and nodded to Rick. We'd go through with it, but only if Mia agreed. When the ceremony concluded and everyone was moving to the reception, I pulled Mia aside. The noise of laughter and clinking glasses surrounded us like a muffled storm. But in that small corner, it was just us. Something happened. I started, watching her expression shift from concern to worry. Alex and his wife showed up. Mom and Dad brought them. Her brows furrowed, and for a moment, the smile that had lit up her face disappeared. But Mia was Mia, strong, grounded. She let out a sigh and then nodded. What are you going to do? She asked. I hesitated, feeling the weight of my next words. Rick has a plan. It's dramatic, but it's the only way I can make them understand. I don't want this to ruin our day, but I need them to know what they've done. I waited, heart pounding, for her response. Mia was silent for a moment, her eyes searching mine. Then, with a soft smile that calmed the storm inside me, she said, If this is what you need to do to finally be free of this, then do it. I'm here, Mark. God, I loved her. I pressed a kiss to her forehead and whispered, Thank you. She squeezed my hand before joining her friends, leaving me with Rick and the weight of what I was about to do. The reception began, and everything looked perfect. The tables were set with candles and fresh flowers, the soft hum of conversation and laughter creating a warm atmosphere. I could see Alex and his wife sitting at a table near the back. His eyes were downcast, and he looked like a man who didn't want to be there. His wife, pregnant and blissfully unaware of the years of pain that led to this moment, seemed confused but cheerful. My parents were trying their best to pretend nothing was amiss, smiling stiffly whenever anyone passed by. The toast started, light and filled with warmth. Friends shared funny stories and memories that brought smiles and laughter. Rick went up, his voice steady and strong, giving a toast that was both sincere and strategic. It was his job to set the stage. And now I'd like to invite the groom up to say a few words, Rick said, looking at me with a slight nod that only I could catch. The room shifted, heads turning as I stood and made my way to the front. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, each step closer to the moment of reckoning. I raised my glass and began, my voice steady but carrying the weight of truth. Thank you all for being here today to celebrate with Mia and me. It means the world to us to be surrounded by people we love and who love us in return. My eyes drifted to Alex, who was now looking at me, his face pale. My parents looked wary, their smiles frozen, as if they could sense what was coming. But today, I want to make a special toast, I continued, and the room quieted, the hum of conversation dying down until only the sound of my voice filled the space. I want to toast my brother, Alex. A collective shift ran through the room. My mother's hand went to her chest and my father stiffened. Alex's wife glanced at him, confused, while he sat motionless, eyes locked on me. Alex and I haven't spoken in years, I said, letting the silence stretch. And many of you might not know why. It's a painful story, one that starts with trust and ends in betrayal. Years ago, I was in a relationship with someone who I thought was the love of my life. She wasn't. But I learned that the hardest way possible was when I found out she had been cheating on me. With my brother. Gasps rippled through the room, a mixture of shock and disbelief. My mother's face went white, and my father's eyes dropped to the floor. I didn't let the tension break. I pushed on, the truth pouring out like a river finally freed from a dam. It was the hardest thing I've ever been through, to be betrayed by not just one person, but two people who were supposed to have my back. I walked away from that relationship and from Alex. And for years I've been asked to forgive, to let it go for the sake of family. But today, surrounded by those who love us, I wanted to share that sometimes forgiveness isn't about them. It's about us. It's about finding peace in knowing we deserve better. I turned my eyes to Alex, who sat frozen, his wife looking stunned and slowly putting the pieces together. So, Alex, I want to thank you, because without that betrayal, I wouldn't have met Mia. I wouldn't have learned that love isn't about drama or deceit, but about trust and kindness. You may have broken my trust, but you paved the way for something much better. For that, I am grateful. Silence. It pressed down on everyone in the room like a heavy blanket. Alex's wife looked at him with tears welling in her eyes, realization dawning painfully. My mother's mouth opened as if to say something, but no words came out. My father's head hung low, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. I took a sip of my drink and set the glass down, the weight in my chest lifting just a fraction. To family, I said softly, the irony not lost on anyone. I sat down and Rick, bless him, stood up and started clapping, breaking the tense silence. Some guests joined, hesitant and unsure, but it was enough to let the room breathe again. The focus shifted, the whispers started, and I could see the shockwaves ripple through the crowd. Alex's wife stood up, muttered an apology to no one in particular, and walked out. He followed a few moments later, head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. My parents sat rooted to their chairs, as if moving would shatter them completely. Mia slipped her hand into mine, squeezing it gently. I glanced at her and she smiled, a real, genuine smile that reminded me of why I did this. For us, for our future, and for the peace I'd been chasing for years. The air in the reception hall was thick with whispers and sideways glances. After my toast, I felt as if I'd just taken a sledgehammer to an already fragile glass house, and the pieces were still falling. But there was no going back now, no way to sweep this moment under the rug. I'd exposed the cracks, and the damage was laid bare for everyone to see. Alex had left with his wife, her expression a mix of betrayal and heartbreak. I watched them go, not with satisfaction, but with a strange hollowness, like a storm that had passed, leaving nothing but quiet devastation. My parents sat in stunned silence, my mother's eyes red-rimmed as she tried to hold back tears, my father staring into his lap, lost in thought. Mia leaned into me, her voice soft. "Are you okay?" she asked, eyes searching mine. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure if that was true. I had expected anger, tears, maybe even shouts, but what I got was worse. A silence so deep it felt like the earth had stopped spinning. Rick, ever the protector, clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You did what you had to do," he said under his breath. "They'll either get it or they won't, but that's not on you." His words should have been comforting, but they felt weightless against the avalanche of emotion that had buried me. I turned my attention back to Mia. This day was supposed to be about us, about love and new beginnings, and here it was overshadowed by ghosts I thought I had buried. She gave me a small smile, and just like that, the guilt settled in. I'd pulled her into my storm, let my past seep into what was supposed to be our perfect day. But Mia was resilient, and when the whispers turned to awkward laughter and people tried to salvage the evening, she stayed by my side, steady as ever. The following days were a blur of texts, calls, and messages I ignored. My mother's voice echoed on voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. "Mark, you need to come home. We need to talk about what happened." Click. "Mark, please, your father and I are trying to understand, but this isn't the way." Click. And finally, "How could you humiliate us like that? How could you do this to Alex and to me?" That one stung, but I let it go unanswered. Mia and I retreated to our little world, trying to pick up where we left off, trying to start our marriage without the specter of my family hovering over us. But the fallout was unavoidable. My dad called once, his voice calm but resigned. "I'm not going to push you, son. Just know that when you're ready, I'm here." I appreciated that. Unlike my mom, who seemed unable to see past the image of a fractured family, my dad at least acknowledged my pain, even if he didn't fully understand it. A few days later, a call came from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was just another attempt from my mom using a different phone, but something made me pick up. "Mark, it's Amy." The voice on the other end was tired, strained, but unmistakably kind. Alex's wife. My heart sank, knowing this was bound to get more complicated. "I know this is out of the blue, but can we talk? Just once, face to face?" I hesitated, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. I thought of Mia and how I dragged her into this mess, but I also thought of Amy, pregnant, blindsided by a betrayal she had no part in. "Okay," I finally said. "Let's meet." Amy showed up at a cafe, her belly prominent and eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She looked at me with a mix of curiosity and pain, as if she were trying to piece together the version of me Alex had described and the man who stood before her. "Thank you for meeting me," she started, her voice steady but soft. "I know this must be difficult." I nodded, not sure where to begin. "It's okay. You deserve the truth." She took a deep breath, glancing down at her hands as she twisted her wedding ring. "Alex told me his version of what happened, but I knew there was more. What you said at the wedding?" Her voice caught, and she swallowed hard. "I need to know if it's true," I told her. I told her everything, from the day I found out Emily was cheating to the betrayal that shattered my trust to the years of silence that followed. I left out nothing, even when her eyes filled with tears and she looked away. When I finished, the silence stretched between us, heavy and full of shared pain. "Why didn't he tell me?" she whispered, almost to herself. "Because admitting what he did would mean facing it," I said, my voice bitter. "He wasn't just protecting himself, he was protecting the lie." Amy nodded, her eyes distant as she processed everything. "I knew there were things he wasn't telling me, but I never imagined—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't know what I'm going to do now, Mark, but thank you for telling me the truth." We sat in silence for a while, two people bound by a betrayal that wasn't ours to bear, but had become ours to endure. Before she left, she turned to me, eyes wet but determined. "I won't stay with someone who lies, not with a child coming. Thank you for being honest, even when it wasn't easy." The news of Amy filing for divorce reached me through my dad. He called late one night, his voice cautious. "Your brother, he's not doing well. Amy left him. I thought you should know." I stayed quiet, feeling the weight of it but not the guilt. Alex had chosen this path. He'd sown this pain, and now he was reaping it. "Mark," my dad continued, sighing into the phone. "I don't blame you for what you did. Your mother, she's struggling, but I think she'll come around. Just give her time." "Thanks, Dad," I said, surprised by the comfort his words brought. "But I need space." "For me and for Mia, I understand," he said, and I believed him. Alex tried to reach out, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready, and I didn't know if I ever would be. But for now, there was a strange peace in knowing that the truth was out and that the ghosts were no longer mine to carry alone. Life settled into an uneasy rhythm after Amy filed for divorce. The air around me felt clearer, as if the storm had passed, leaving behind silence and space to breathe. Mia and I tried to find our normal, building the life we'd dreamed of before the weight of my family's betrayal crashed down on us. We'd sit together on our small balcony, sipping coffee in the mornings as the sun rose. And in those moments, I could almost forget the chaos that had unfolded. But healing isn't linear. There were days when the phone would buzz with another attempt from my mother, another message asking for reconciliation. "We need to be family again, Mark. Please, just talk to Alex." Each message twisted the knife a little deeper, but I let them go unanswered. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine just because it was what she wanted. Mia, ever my anchor, would reach for my hand when she saw the shadows cloud my face. "It's okay to feel conflicted," she'd remind me. "You did what you had to do. That doesn't make you wrong." Amy reached out a couple more times as well. We didn't talk often, but when we did, it was about practical things. She kept me updated on how she was doing and how she was preparing for the baby alone. She never blamed me for what happened, and I respected her strength in walking away from the comfort of a lie for the truth. One afternoon, I got a call from my dad. It was rare for him to reach out directly, and I hesitated before answering. "Mark," he said, his voice heavy. I won't take up much of your time. I just need you to know that your mom is having a hard time letting go. She feels like she's lost her family and it's breaking her." I swallowed, the guilt nudging at the edges of my mind. "I know, Dad, but she needs to see that this isn't something I can just forget. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice that Alex made, one that changed everything." He sighed, and I could hear the weight of the years in that exhale. "I know, son. I know, just don't shut the door forever. Not for us and not for yourself. I quote, I'll try," I promised, though I wasn't sure what that meant. Days turned to weeks and then months. Amy gave birth to a baby girl, and despite everything, she sent me a picture. "Meet Lily," the message read. The photo showed a tiny, perfect baby wrapped in a soft blanket, eyes closed, blissfully unaware of the tangled history she was born into. Mia looked over my shoulder and smiled. "She's beautiful," she said, resting her head against mine. There was no bitterness in her voice, no shadow of the past, just genuine kindness. I felt a pang of admiration for Amy. She'd found her way forward, even when her world had been upended. Alex, on the other hand, was unraveling. The whispers I heard through the grapevine painted a picture of a man lost, someone who had gambled and lost everything. Part of me thought about reaching out, extending some branch of understanding. But every time I thought about it, the memories of those texts, the coldness in his eyes when I confronted him, stopped me. Maybe time would dull that ache. Maybe one day I'd be ready to hear him out. But not yet. Mia and I focused on us, carving out a life that felt honest and whole. We took weekend trips, explored small towns, and made a point to fill our home with laughter and light. But there were moments like when I received another voice message from my mom, her voice cracking as she said, "Mark, I miss you," when the past would seep in, staining the edges of our happiness. One evening, as the air turned cool with the coming fall, Mia and I sat on our balcony, watching the leaves begin their slow change to fiery reds and golds. She leaned into me, and I wrapped an arm around her, feeling the steady thump of her heartbeat. "Do you think it'll ever really be over?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, eyes wise beyond her years. "Maybe not the way we want it to be, but that doesn't mean we can't find peace, Dot." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was the truth. The echoes of betrayal, the hurt, and the fractured bonds wouldn't just disappear. They were part of the story now, stitched into the fabric of who I was. But I could choose what came next. I could choose the love that Mia and I had, the laughter, the quiet mornings, and the future we'd build one day at a time. As the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of change, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The past had carved its scars into me, but it hadn't broken me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like that was enough.